One. It is past 7 o'clock, so I think it's about time to kick it off. Wow, I think, is everyone from the bar inside the venue space right now? Wow, it's such a great view. All these people here. It's a full house as expected. I'm very happy that so many people showed up. Welcome to the biggest and best AmsterdamJS in the history of AmsterdamJS. Woo! So our Meetup group is clearly on a roll, and I think that's wonderful for Amsterdam, for JavaScript, and of course for all of us here. So let's make this one a good one, and let's keep it up. So for those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Tim. I am have been an active member of this Meetup group, AmsterdamJS, since its beginning in 2010. And I have co-founded and partner at a company called Startup Studio Neskio, which has been doing startups since before the word startup was even a thing. So if you are into startups and you would be interested to working with us, let's talk, send me a message. But of course, I'm not doing this by myself. I could not do this by myself. These are the people that are currently actively involved in organizing this wonderful string of events. I would like to highlight two of those. Robert, first of all, who has been a consistent and reliable organizer by my side, who has been in charge of speakers and in charge of live streaming. We live stream every event, as you may know. Second of all, I would like to highlight Rick, because he wasn't really involved. He's over there. He wasn't really involved at the beginning, but he's basically signed up right away and said, I want to do awesome stuff. Let's do experimental stuff. I'm going to spend a lot of time and effort in having some fun together. So I'm happy to announce that tonight you will be witnessing the second, hopefully improved iteration of our experimental game show format. Never mind the buzzwords at the end of this program. But of course, we could always use some more help. In particular, we do without a photographer tonight because we couldn't find anyone willing to take upon that role. But I think it's a pity, it's a shame, because I would love to show the world what AmsterdamJS is all about, and that these are the events that you should come to if you're interested in JavaScript around the Amsterdam region. And one very powerful way of doing it, that is just making nice photographs and sharing them. So if you are into photography and would be willing to take up that role of official AmsterdamJS photographer, grant the freedom of roaming around on the events without having to sit on your chair all day, please let us know. We would be very interested in discussing this with you. Also, we could use someone who loves managing the Twitter account that we have, because we have a pretty awesome Twitter account. We just don't do much with it yet, and it would be, I think, very, very, very possible to spread the AmsterdamJS gospel a lot more effectively if someone would just be willing to put some love in there. So if you're into Twitter, let us know. We could use some help there as well. And then last but not least, in terms of thanking people, would be our partners, because, well, it's nice to have a venue like this, nice to have free drinks at the bar, free food, everything, but it wouldn't be possible without support of our dedicated partners. First of all, Frontiers, which is a professional association for front-end developers here in Holland. They have been around for 10 years now, and they were founded to promote the profession of front-end development, and they try to do anything that helps the position of front-end developers here in Holland. They have a very well-known conference, as you may know. And they do many other things. They have a job board. So if you consider yourself a front-end developer, take a look at them and maybe you should become a member. Second of all, also a very long-term dedicated partner of ours is Bluefront. Bluefront is a front-end consultancy software shop in Alphen aan den Rijn, a little town close by. So if you like working for big clients in an informal setting, you should take a look at them. Third one that I want to mention is the Front-End Lab. Many of you probably know the name because they are super active here in the Amsterdam scene. Basically they are a developer matchmaker that permanently has a wide range of job opportunities available. And they have been actively involved in Amsterdam's Meetup scene for many years now. Last but not least, the new kid on the block, a new sponsor that was acquired by Diana, also one of the new AmsterdamJS organizer team members. Spindrift is a full-service digital agency that specializes in the Oracle CX Cloud. Wow. So if you are interested in Oracle stuff and you would like to work in an international company with a local office here in Utrecht, take a look at them. And then a little announcement that sort of is hard to believe, even for me still, because last event I announced, quite astonished, that we had reached more than 1,500 members, up from only 1,200 or something 3 months before. No, yeah, not even 3 months before. A little bit more than 3 months before. But now we moved from 1,500 to more than 1,750 members. So I'm very excited to see that so many people are discovering the fact that this Meetup group is alive and kicking. And this is definitely the place to go for people that are interested in JavaScript here in Amsterdam. So I'm very curious to see what announcement I can make next event, but this is just awesome. Yes, little holler from the back there. All right, last thing that I want to mention before I move on to the schedule. As many of you may know, the biggest new thing that we are doing this year in terms of AmsterdamJS and the AmsterdamJS brand is that we are going to do an actual full-day conference this year, Thursday, the 8th of June, which is a different date than was communicated before, mind you. Earlier announcements said Friday, but due to some unfortunate organizational mishap, we have decided to move it from Friday to Thursday. So please update your agendas and move this red cross that you put there from Friday the 9th to Thursday the 8th. Sale starts Monday the 3rd of April, which is next Monday. Those of you who have kept an eye on their inbox know that there is a special discount for community members, so that's you. The coupon code is AmstJS Club. It's still valid, so as soon as the second batch of tickets opens next Monday, please keep this coupon code by your side. Let me see, what else do I need to mention here? Yeah, so the early bird is actually unfortunately sold out in just a few days. So it's no longer going to be early bird batch, but the next batch is going to be available next Monday. And please note that we have very limited capacity due to our awesome venue, which is Artis Zoo. So better be quick and keep an eye on Twitter to know when the batch opens. Yeah, I think that's the gist of what I wanted to tell you in the administrative corner. Time for the schedule. The schedule for tonight. You may have read it on the website also, but this is one more time for you here. at 9, at the end of this event, right after Never Mind the Buzzwords, there will be more drinks in the cafe right next door. So please stick around. It's nice weather, so no reason to rush home. There will be a short break of around 15 minutes. And before that, there will be 2 talks by members, honorable members of our community. The first of which will be Vincent. He's sitting over here, and he's going to tell you all about functional reactive programming. Give him a round of applause for Vincent.
Really great to see all this turnout, so many people, sorry, eager to learn new stuff and to learn, to broaden their view. Any minute now? Yeah. So now, sorry for that. Okay, so it's great to see so many of you here wanting to learn new things and to expand your way of programming, and I think that's one of the great things about the JavaScript community. So, for example, who here would consider themselves a functional programming enthusiast? See, right, quite some hands. That's fantastic. I think even though JavaScript it's not Haskell and it won't be, but you can clearly see that functional programming has very much influenced the way we program in JavaScript. And I think that functional reactive programming, which I will be telling you about in a minute, is pretty much the same way. So this FRP hasn't made its way to my boring stack yet, but it has definitely influenced the way I program and the way I think about my programs. And this is a pretty great thing. And you can see this in the greater JavaScript ecosystem as well. I think FRP is really starting to influence the greater community. So you can see this, for example, in Angular, which has been shipping the most popular FRP library in JavaScript, RxJS, for quite a while now. And you can see this in, like, if you squint a bit, the way we program our React applications can be modeled as a reactive system. And actually, the observable, which is the primary building block of FRP, it's actually on its way to be standardized in JavaScript, although it's still early days. So it's really it's really starting to influence the JavaScript community, and so that will be my main goal tonight. To well, first of all, to get you excited about FRP and to hopefully help you appreciate it, but also to even if you do not go all in, that you will still apply this to the rest of your programming. And I hope to achieve this by showing what it's like when you do go all in. But to get there, I will have to take a short detour, so bear with me before I actually get to FRP. So how will I get there? Well, I'll first start by discussing how we introduce bugs to our code, how they exist, or how they occur. And then, and only then will I introduce FRP, because I think it provides a very nice way of dealing with these bugs. And then after that, I will do a short demo of what it looks like to really program write a program using FRP. And then if there's some time left, I'll try to introduce a short way of really going all in, but I think you can probably think of that by yourself as well, so it's not that bad if I miss that. And then at the end, I will draw some conclusions, of course. Is there anyone who can tell me who the most famous Dutch computer scientist is? Edgar Dijkstra, exactly. So I thought it would be fun to start with a quote by Dijkstra. It's mostly just funny. But what he said is, if debugging is the process of removing bugs, then programming must be the process of putting them in. Well, I hope that it's that we program more than bugs. But there's actually a lesson in here, I think, and that is, like, debugging is good, and it's great that we're removing bugs from our software, but it would, of course, be better if we would just not introduce these bugs in the first place. So how can we do this? Well, let's first consider what a bug actually is. And basically, a bug is software behaving in a way other than what we expected it to do or what we intended it to do. So it's when we have difficulty following our own code. So how does that happen? Well, consider this piece of code. So this is actually pretty simple, right? So we have a counter, and by calling the increment function or the decrement function, you can actually alter the value of that counter. And we can also, this is relatively easy to follow, but I would argue that actually this code has the seed of becoming difficult to maintain later on. So imagine that our increment function and our decrement function, they start to increase in size. We're adding more lines. At a certain point, we're refactoring stuff, and these functions end up in their own files. And then at a certain point, if you want to modify the increment function, then all of a sudden it's referring to this counter variable, which is not even located in the same file. And you have to be aware of the rest of your code base before modifying this function, because that could influence the behavior of your function. So we need to find a way around this. So how can we do that? Well, basically it's by writing our functions in another way, namely by avoiding modifying stuff outside of the scope of the function and making it what's called a pure function, which probably many of you already are familiar with. But it means that you pass everything, or with some hand waving, it means that you pass it everything that it needs and it doesn't modify anything outside it. So what would that look like? Well, it would look somewhat like this. So, apologies for this, I use TypeScript, but so you pass it a value, namely the current value of the counter, and it returns, instead of modifying that value, it returns a new value. So for example, for the increment function over here, you pass it the current value of the counter, and it returns that, it returns a new number that is one higher than the value it received, and the same for the decrement function. So at this point, if you're modifying this function, you don't need to worry about whatever is happening outside of this code. As long as you're getting past a certain value, you will return the correct new value. So this is nice and all, but of course this is not how you would, or we still need to keep track of the state of our counter somewhere. So if we were to actually use it, we'd probably we'd have to do something like this. So we pass it the current value of the counter, and then the return value, we assign that back to the counter variable. But of course, when you start to actually do this, usually you don't just want to increment the counter. You want to do this, for example, in response to user input. So we write an on-click handler, and then which is called when the user clicks a button. And then the increment function is called again, and it modifies its value. But the observant ones among you will have noticed that this function again has side effects. It's modifying this counter variable, which is located outside of the scope of this on-click handler. So this is a bit where we get stuck. We want to program as much as possible with pure functions, but we're somewhat forced to deal with side effects, with modifying things outside of the scope. So keep that in mind for a bit, and I will quickly introduce FRP. So yeah, I got this really nice slide, which came with the template. So the primary building block of reactive programming is the observable, which I will introduce in a bit. and it turns into functional reactive programming when we apply functional concepts to this observable data structure. So what is an observable? Well, basically it's this, or actually it's just this. So by convention we append a $sign to the name of an observable to indicate that it is an observable. And basically it's an object that represents values that are produced over time. So they have a subscribe method which you pass a callback, and that callback gets called every time a new value is produced. So for the more visually oriented people, it's somewhat like this. So this is an observable that first produces the value 1, then it produces the value 2, and sometime later it produces the value 3. So in this case, it would call the do something function first with the value 1, then with the value 2, and then it would call it with the value 3. So it's actually a rather simple concept, right? And as I said, you can apply some functional operators on this, and these are usually provided by an FRP library like RxJS or Bacon or Kefir or whatever, but they mostly agree on the initial set of operators, even though they might be named different. But the first one might look familiar, the first one that I'm going to introduce. So this is the map function, which is pretty much like the map function on an array. So you pass it a transformation function, and then the map function will produce a new array that contains the values of the initial array, but then passed through that function. So in this case, I gave it a function that multiplies a value by 10. So if we had initial array of 1, 2, 3, then it will produce a new array that had the values 10, 20, 30. So in the case of this observable, we have an initial observable that at some point in time will produce the values 1, then 2, then 3. But we receive a new observable that will actually produce the values 10, 20, 30 when the initial observable produces values. The second operator might seem familiar as well, because for arrays, this would actually be called reduce. And basically what it does is you pass it a function that receives an accumulator and a new value, and then it will combine those two. So in this case, I'll add them together. So we get a 1, then we get a 2, which is added to the 1 to produce 3. We get another 3, which produces a 6 in the output observable. Get another 4, it makes 10, and 5 makes 15. You get the point. So and actually, these operators are not even limited to a single observable. So as an example, a really simple one is the merge operator, which simply produces a new observable based on 2 initial observables that produces new values whenever either of the input observables produce a value. And these operators, they might all seem rather simple, but once you start to combine them, they grow really powerful. And what you should note is that these functions that we pass to these operators, these are all pure functions. They do not modify anything outside of this function itself. They receive input, they produce some output. So this allows us to write our applications with as much pure functions as possible. So I'm going to show a demo of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to push side effects to the edge of our application. So we're going to need to do some side effects to receive input from the user, and we're going to need some side effects to produce some output to the user. But as much as possible between that, we want to be pure functions. So what would that look like? Well, I'm going to, let me see, yeah. So we're going to produce this application. Oh, that's my full screen. So as you might imagine, we have a simple counter, and we can press +1 or -1 to modify this value. So what does this look like? Cheers. So we have a markup like this. So 2 buttons, one with the ID increment button, one with the ID decrement button for the +1, -1, and this element with the ID of counter to show the actual counter value. And we want to actually make that counter work. So what would that look like, or what could that look like using observables? Well, basically we start by getting the element, the input, the increment button element, and we create an observable that will produce values whenever the click event is fired on that button. So that works like this. So we say observable.from event, pass it the element, and then say, okay, for click events, I want to receive values. And we do the same for the decrement button, of course. So we have this element with the ID decrement button, and we capture click events inside an observable. And we can save these two to an increment click observable and a decrement click observable. So these are our input observables. And this is the part where we went from the input side effects into the nice and clean observable land immediately. And at the end, we're going to assume we have a nice observable producing new counter values. So whenever the counter changes, it produces a value, and we want to display that to the screen. So we would do that like this. So we assume for now this counter observable. We subscribe to it, and whenever we receive a new value, we look up the counter element, and we set its content to be the counter value. So then, how do we get from the input observables to the output observable? Well, we start by taking the observable producing new events whenever, or producing new click events whenever you click it, and we map that to the value 1 because we want to increment our counter by 1. The same for the decrements, but then we map them to -1. We can merge these together, so now we have a single observable that produces 1 whenever you click the increment button and -1 when you click the decrement button. And of course, when the user hasn't clicked anything yet, we want it to produce a value 0 for initially. We can then use the scan method that I introduced earlier to actually combine these values. So we start with a 0, and then whenever you receive a 1 or a -1, you add that to the previous value. And basically that's it. So now we have this count observable, and we've already seen how we use that to display values to the user. So let's say we want to modify this code right now. So I'm not sure if it's an urban legend or not, but people say that there are skyscrapers where for superstitious people they've skipped the 13th floor. Has anybody ever seen such a? Do they actually exist? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's say we have to make a counter for the elevators there. So we want to modify this code to skip the 13th floor and to actually move on to the 14th or the 12th whenever we get there. So let's take this code we had up there. So this is the code we just saw in the slides. Is it visible enough? Oh, I can zoom in a bit. This is clear enough, right? Yeah. Okay. And one thing that I did not mention yet is another really nice advantage, in my opinion, of pure functions is that they're really easy to test. So we'll see that as well. So let's start with, so basically this is the meat of our application, right? This is the thing that updates our counter value. So let's extract this into its own function because that's nice. Update counter, oh, I should really, oh, I got this. So I've already, what was the shortcut? This. So I've already extracted this function before, but this is the same function, right? We receive the accumulator and the new value, and we return both added together. So now to modify this, as I said, it's really easy to test pure functions. So I've already written some tests for this earlier. So these tests test our increment and decrement. But now let's write a test for skipping the 13th floor. So it should skip the number 13 when incrementing. I usually type more accurately. So when we come from 12, we add 1. We actually want it to end up at 14 rather than 13. So now increment. So we want to do the same for decrementing, but then when we come from 14 and we subtract 1, we actually want, we actually want to end up at 12 instead of 13. So let's run these tests. I have to zoom this in as well. So let's run our tests. Hopefully 2 will fail, right? So we see 2 passing tests, which are the ones I wrote initially, and 2 failing tests. And as you can see here, we expected 14, but we got 13 right now. So let's implement this. So basically, what we need to do is, well, if the value that we're calculating right now, if that will end up at 13, all we have to do is multiply the new value we get by 2. So then we will end up at 1 higher or lower than where we were. So now let's rerun our tests. Hopefully all are, yes, so all are succeeding. This is not actually that interesting. I'm restarting the app. So here we are now. Let's see whether it actually works, but we have the test running already, so having some faith, but then again, it's a demo, so you never know. So I go to 12, now pray for me. Yes, so we actually skipped the number 14, and then that's basically number 13. And that's basically all there is to modifying this application. You should note that I didn't have to think about anything other than this function. Nothing else was relevant. And for testing, I could just input some value and check the output value. So this is rather, I mean, the concept of FRP is maybe difficult to grasp initially, but once you can read that, then it's rather easy actually to modify your code. So yeah, how am I for time? 7 minutes. Okay, that's good enough. So so basically that's FRP, and so what observables are really nice for are for asynchronous data. So and what I've hopefully shown is that it's that occurs more often than you might think. So user input is asynchronous. Displaying things to the user can be asynchronous, but it could also be, for example, if you have a backend that you're merging several microservices responses together, which is also asynchronous. So these are all cases where observables might come in handy. So now I'm going to actually recommend, I'm going to name yet another JavaScript framework, but bear with me, because I think, so let's just cut to the chase. It's CycleJS, which is a really nice framework, which I actually wouldn't recommend you to start jumping in and use it in production right now, because it's rather small in terms of community. So although not, it's no React or Angular, for example. But I would very much encourage you to try to write an application using this, because it really helps you to think reactively. And basically, the way creating applications in CycleJS works, it's pretty much like I just showed you, except you don't have to deal with the side effects on the that I had to do initially. So you don't have to convert the input events to observables, and you don't have to convert the output to or take the output observable and then modify the DOM manually. CycleJS takes care of this for you. So how does this work? Well, let's say this is your app, your CycleJS app. And if you want to update the DOM, CycleJS provides a driver for you. That's what it's called. So in this case, a DOM driver. So what you do if you want to update the DOM in CycleJS, you don't have to do that manually. You simply pass a description of what you want the DOM to look like, much like virtual DOM in React, and you push that onto an observable that the DOM driver listens to. And likewise, if you want to respond to user events, you don't have to manually listen to events or whatever. The DOM driver can also provide you with an input observable that produces new descriptions of whatever event just occurred. And that means that your app simply consists of transformations of input observables to output observables, and your entire app can remain pure. And this is just, and this holds for all side effects. So not just the DOM driver for interacting with the DOM, but also, for example, if you want to perform an HTTP request, there's an HTTP driver, and so you push a description of the request you want to perform onto the output observable, and then the HTTP driver also provides you with an observable that provides HTTP responses. And there's drivers for pretty much every side effect you can think of. So if you want to make WebSocket requests, if you want to interact with the browser history, you name it, there's probably a side effect or a driver for that. And of course, you can write your own, but then you still have to deal with side effects yourself. So yeah, I think that basically was it. So to recap a bit, I started with bugs occur when we can't follow our own code, and when it does things we don't want it to do. This often happens when we're dealing with side effects in a function, because then we have to take the entire code base into account, which can especially become difficult when, for example, a new colleague jumps in or something. So to avoid side effects, we use pure functions, and programming with pure functions can be practical when you do FRP. So if you're interested in this, I sometimes write about things like this on my website, vincenttoenroe.com. There's also a summary of this talk over there. I will link it on the Meetup page as well, so you can read it back in your own pace if you're interested. So yeah, I think that was it. So thank you for listening.
We have around 3 minutes for a few questions before we switch the speakers. So if somebody wants to ask a question, raise your hand. I'll pass the mic.
Any questions? Yeah.
Hi. Thank you. That's interesting. One question, just out of curiosity, because I'm imagining the code that would do the same thing in like old-fashioned and not so cool style, like with side effects and everything, and I think it would be much like shorter. Let's say.
Like without the...
yeah, without observables, well, the way you showed in the beginning. So what I'm thinking now is that I'm just curious, how do you actually start writing the code in this way from the very beginning, or you're like, there is some kind of a moment that you know, okay, this is the time when I need to convert my code into something more like reliable, I don't know, testable, whatever.
Like I start from observables and move
the
other way around?
Do you start with using observables in this kind of code, or you start with like old-fashioned style and then at some point convert it to FRP style?
Yeah. So basically, what I mentioned in the beginning is it's not part of my boring stack. So I don't usually start writing my code in this unless I want to toy with FRP. So using observables is mostly in my I don't usually go from one to the other, because I know so there are some downsides of FRP. I think the biggest one is people don't really know it. So if you work with multiple people, you don't use it. But if I for my own project or something, when I do it in this style, I don't really switch. But I haven't done really large projects yet, so who knows?
All right, a few more questions. One in the back.
Excuse me, sorry. Are the observables part of the ES17 spec?
No. 17 is, I think it's already finalized.
Oh, so it's...
Or almost. No, not yet. But no, they're not. So I think it's at stage probably 0, maybe 1. So and there's still a lot of discussion about it. So it was also influenced by the... so there was also a proposed extension to the promise specification where there were ways to cancel it, and that influenced the observable spec, and then that proposal for promises was thrown away, so now the observable spec has to be redone again. But there's definitely momentum behind it, but it will take probably a few years before it's actually in the spec.
Okay, and one other question is, what is the underlying driver of observables in C? Is it sockets or intervals? Or
no, it's just behind the scenes it's all callbacks, so it's just a single-threaded JavaScript.
Okay, thanks.
Let's do a few more questions until the second speaker is ready. So just raise your hand, I will come with the mic.
So I think it's very difficult to make it fully functional because you always have the input-output from the browser, right? If you manipulate the DOM, there might always be another event listener that does something or modifies some other state outside of your knowing. So how would you prevent that?
Yeah, so in the style programming I demoed, so what you try to do is, or you accept that you have to do some side effects, but you want to minimize it as much and really limit that to input and output, and then move that into observables as soon as possible. So at least the large chunk of your application is written in observables. But if you use CycleJS, for example, then yes, there are side effects, but you don't have to deal with them in your own code. It's CycleJS drivers that do that. So in that case, you actually can be fully functional, and the function that produces, you don't manually manipulate the DOM, but you just produce an output. So that's still a pure function from a certain state to a description of what the output should look like given that state.
Right, but if I would like to start tomorrow with, converting my legacy project to reactive functional, then how is that possible, or?
I mean,
would I need to start from scratch?
I haven't done that, so it's purely my imagination at this point. Fully reactive then is basically a full rewrite if you want to do that, and you have to consider whether it's actually worth it. Like if your application is running fine, then why change it? But I think you could, for example, in Angular, it's rather limited the way, or you can go all in or very far with observables. But basically, you can use it over there by just transforming incoming HTTP responses into some form values or something, and then you can just do small parts. But then you have to consider whether it's worth it because it's something new to learn again. So yeah, converting your application fully, I would think twice about that. But writing more pure functions is definitely always possible.
Thanks.
All right, I think that's it with the questions. I think Vincent. And the mic is on?
I think so.
All right, great. Go.
Thank you, Vincent. Love to see TDD on a stage, actually. Thank you. I'm here to tell you today talking about Webpack, but first about me. I'm Norbert. I work at a company called Xebia. I'm a full-stack JavaScript developer. I do Node and browser. Something that happened to me very recently, I became the maintainer of Storybook. Maybe people know about it. But I'm going to be talking about Webpack. But talking about any technology, really, we should be talking about the problem that it solves. So many people talk about technology and get tired about hearing new, like a very high churn of JavaScript tooling, frameworks. So I think if we start talking about the problems, the new things that we experience solve, we can gain more understanding about it. And we can keep this JavaScript fatigue hashtag low on the rankings on Twitter. So the problem Webpack solves is that web applications are really complex. There's lots of stuff that's happening and it comes together when building our app. So there's CSS, images, JavaScript, fonts, templates, data all being combined, pushed to the browser, and it needs to download those assets and parse them, etc. And it coming together in a very standard way, that's kind of, this image is supposed to be there, right? This font's supposed to be there, but how can you be sure these dependencies are not actually managed? So, yeah, these assets, images, font, styling, these are dependencies on our app, on our application. So that's one of the core philosophies of Webpack, is that everything is a module. Every reference to something that you use, it's a module, and it's a dependency. And if you look at your application like that, you create a graph. Your app, your entry, it needs like a database connector, it needs some styling, it needs some templates, all these things, all these files that you've got all over. They create a dependency graph. I say graph because most people think about dependencies like a tree. It's not a tree, because you can have circular dependencies, but also libraries that get lots of dependencies on them. And one of the philosophies of Webpack is that it bundles all those things together and outputs into a few files. So it sort of looks like this. You've got lots of files all connected together. Webpack takes a certain point where it starts traversing this graph, and then it turns it into a few files. This sort of sounds similar to a lot of people doing what they do with Grunt or Gulp, but it's different in a way that you actually are creating this graph with every file. So doing a few pipelines with Gulp or Grunt, you have a pipeline for your CSS, you've got a pipeline for your templates, stuff in JavaScript, stuff like that. With Webpack, everything is connected. If they're not connected by a dependency, they're not going to be bundled with Webpack. Sure, you can do like bundling your JavaScript with Webpack and then doing your CSS on the side with something else. You can do that, but why? Webpack can do it all. So Webpack comes with a file that's usually called the Webpack config.js. This is, a lot of people are hating this file because it can grow very complex. But in its essence, it only needs two things: an entry point, and an output. Webpack on its own will be able to take a lot of JavaScript dependencies and bundle them together. So this configuration would look at a folder called source and then an index.js file, and then whatever dependencies it has, it will bundle them into one file, and it will place that file in a folder called dist, and the file will be named bundle.js. So let's talk about some concepts. Webpack needs an entry point. It can have multiple, so you can have multiple pipelines. For example, if you've got multiple apps, you can ask Webpack to bundle multiple apps in one go. You could do that, but there's also multiple reasons. But for simplicity's sake and time, let's assume there's going to be one entry point for your entire app. So Webpack needs this to bootstrap itself, to go and do things. It needs a start point of your graph. And then it will output these things into chunks. If you just do very basic thing, it will have one entry point, lots of dependencies, one output file. These output files are sort of the same as chunks. Chunks have a more complex definition. But for simplicity's sake, let's call a exit file a chunk. Webpack then has a definition of a loader. This is sort of a file transformation. You can ask, you could require an image. And a image loader would transform this path of a image file into something you would want. It can be anything you want. It could be a hash of the content. It could be the URL written in ES whatever to ES5 or ES whatever if you configure it that way. You know, whatever you've got Babel configured to do, this loader will do it. Plugins. So anything that a loader does not do, a plugin can do. Webpack has something that's called the compilation lifecycle. There are lots of steps. I'll dive into that a little bit later. So how do we configure a plugin? We tell Webpack that there's a plugin array, and this is a plain array. As you may have noticed, this Webpack config.js is a normal JavaScript file. So you can do lots of crazy stuff in this file. This is where most of the complexion comes from. If you're just starting out with Webpack, I suggest keeping it simple. Having multiple Webpack config files is not all that bad. Actually, for starters, it's the most easy setup. So back to plugins. This plugin will just register with Webpack and inject itself into the lifecycle. The order of this array matters, but it's not guaranteed the order in which the Webpack, the plugins are executed. I'll explain that a little bit later. So then another concept that we should know is a target. So Webpack can target multiple platforms. Of course, we all know the web platform. So that basically means a browser. But it also has a node target, and it also has a web worker and an Electron. It has a few more, but they are rarely used, and I have never used them. So how would we tell Webpack that we want a specific target? We just have a property called target. By default, this is web, so it will by default bundle for browsers. If you can imagine that JavaScript that needs to be executed by Node, it looks a little bit different from what needs to be executed in a browser, right? So, examples. I've created a few very small micrographs, like a dependency chain. And what I want to look at with you is what Webpack actually does with this graph. How many of you have actually used Webpack and then looked at its output? Nice, actually, quite a lot of people. Nice, good to see. So I've got this index.js file, and I will tell Webpack that I want this file as its entry point. And as you can see, I load some modules, and then I log some things. That's all I'm doing. So when I ask Webpack to do, it will give me some console output. This is the default output that you will be getting, how long it took, what version of Webpack you're using, what chunk, what asset it generated, and which modules are in there. And then the way I'm running this, it also executes the code immediately in Node, so I can see it actually works. So here's just a quick glance through of the modules. They're just basically to have something that works, that's sort of a graph. It's not really interesting. What is interesting, though, is that I can do more exotic things. I can import CSS, I can import a zip file, a PNG file, a markdown file, and these things work, provided you're using the right loaders. So here we go. So one of the loaders I'm using, it's called a file loader. It has detected that this is a zip file It has no meaning in a browser context, so it just generates another file. So we can see that Webpack has now generated 2 files for me instead of 1. So when I actually import this thing, what I'm given is not the actual file, but a reference to the file. So this is really useful for stuff like images or files. In your code, you've got an actual requirement for another file somewhere, and in your code, you're actually given this reference to where it is. So how does this look? Damn it. I always get the keystroke wrong for removing the sidebar. So when people look at a Webpack output, they are faced with these weird, this large chunk, semi-large chunk of Webpack-specific code. What is in there is the dependency management and the dependency resolver that Webpack will need. It needs this especially in the browser, right? Because there is currently no module resolver in the browser. There's one in Node. So Webpack will sort of wrap around it a little bit. And it needs to, because of loaders. But we can have a look at what's in here. There's the Webpack require function definition. It will receive a module ID, and then it will, if the module has not been initialized yet, initialize the module, and then return the exports. If the module has already been initialized, it will just return the exports. This is conformant to this ES modules spec. A module should always be a singleton. It should never be initialized twice. What we can also see is our modules are all put in a large array. And this array has IDs or indexes. And this is what Webpack uses to reference a module. It's an index in this large array. It gives us quite a few comments, so we know what's going on. And something that I would love to see, I'm going to do the index 1 again. Here we go. Something that's quite new in Webpack 2 is something called tree shaking. Rollup made it very, very popular. It basically means that you can import a module, a very large one, like a collection of other modules, and Webpack will make sure that whatever is going to be in the output is as small as possible. We can see this in action already in this file, hopefully. Yep, there we go. There we go, I think. Sorry. Yes, here we go. So in one of my modules, I define an arrow function that returns a constant, but it's never used in our entry point, and nowhere else it's used. So in debug mode, which Webpack is in by default, it will still output these things, but it will add a comment there saying, this is unused. So it actually can detect that, and when you do a production build, it will remove it. So that's pretty cool. We can generate lots of smaller packages that way, ship less code to our clients, which make especially mobile phones a lot happier. Another thing that Webpack does really, really well is called code splitting. So especially when our apps get large, at some point we want to split our app into sections. We don't want to ship an entire app to a client because that client may be on a throttled network. So we want to ship as little as possible, or basically only the things that that page need. The way Webpack allows you to do this is by automatic code splitting. You can do manual code splitting, but I will not cover it. So the interesting bit, is automatic code splitting. I think that's really, really awesome. My editor is complaining that this thing is odd because this is very, very new. This is actually a stage 3 ECMAScript commission standard or proposal. It's called the declarative import. Imperative import. This is a declarative, and this is an imperative import. So this will hopefully eventually end up in browsers. Possibly it's going to be standardized next year. It works very much like static imports. You give it a module name, and it will resolve, except it will not resolve immediately, but it will resolve in a promise. So cool thing is we can use like promise all to chain all these things together. It's really awesome. But you're given the entire module, the module in its entirety, all the exports when the promise resolves. So what you can see is that I then, when this resolves, log it. I can show you this works if I type correctly. So there we go. Nothing changed. From a user's perspective, in Node, nothing changed. I can show you what is now different in the output, because something definitely has changed, right? I can see there's this 0.index.js file. It's a Node module that Webpack will load asynchronously. And we can see this happening. It's always a little bit tricky to find it exactly. There it is. So Webpack will have this require ensure function. It's only there when you do code splitting, so Webpack itself will try and compress its own boilerplate at the top. So when you use code splitting, damn it, go away. Don't tweet at me now. When we're using Node as a target, which is what I'm using because it's very easy to demonstrate, it's fast, it will use the Node require. That's pretty smart. But if I were to change my target, which I can, to web, damn it, go away. Save this. And run it again. My terminal will complain, or actually Node will complain that there's window is not defined. It's because Webpack just generated something that's meant to run in a browser, and I'm trying to run it in Node, and that doesn't work. But I can show you, I could open my browser and see it, but it will only log some things. It's not interesting. But what is interesting is what this actually output, right? Because now Webpack needs to do something different. It cannot use Node's require because Node's require does not exist in this context. It's only in Node. So what needs to happen, first of all, in the file that is going to be asynchronously loaded, this file just cannot export itself as a Node module could do. So it needs to inject itself into an existing Webpack installation, right? So it does that using a Webpack JSON-P function. You can rename this using some options in Webpack. And now Webpack needs to define this function somewhere. And then when this is actually called, it will install the modules that it has received. And we can also see that Webpack has generated a require and sure, once again, but this time its content is different. It will actually inject a script tag somewhere and load this file asynchronously. So this is actually how code splitting. So I talked about plugins a little bit before. I want to reiterate it and explain it a little bit more. So Webpack has this life cycle, and it basically means that there's a start to the compilation, and there's lots of steps that plugins can hook into, change some things, and then leave everything else to do its thing. So a plugin can do something really small, or it can do something really large, especially the optimization plugins, like Uglify or Babily, or some analytics tools. They can be pretty complex because they now need to analyze this entire graph and everything that's been compressed, etc. But also there's some quite small plugins that will, for example, just call a callback function when Webpack is finished. This, for example, is what Webpack Dev Server is using. So it just needs to know, are there any new files? Do I need to swap them out? That's all it needs to know. Webpack itself, lots of the core code in Webpack is actually using its own lifecycle and are actually installed like plugins themselves. Hook into stuff like run or watch run is called when Webpack just starts out. File is called when a file is ejected. You can read the documentation for Webpack online. Especially the documentation for Webpack 2 is very, very good. So writing your first Webpack plugin can be daunting, but this is basically all the code you need. It's a function, and it has an apply method. That's it. And as you can see, your apply method is past a compiler, and upon this compiler, you can register the lifecycles events. So what this plugin will do, it's really awesome. It will console log something when Webpack started. I think it's pretty great. So using Webpack, 1 minute. Wow, dude. You can use Webpack in lots of ways. You can run it using an npm install. You can install it globally, but you shouldn't. You should install it locally and then use an npm script. I'm not going to make it in 1 minute. Can I have 4 or 5 more? 5, please. Webpack also has a Node API. So inside Node scripts, you can run Webpack. This is really powerful if you want to do custom builds, if you want to do multiple Webpacks at the same time, combine them together and generate something, and then kick off your web server, for example. This is really much, much more smarter than trying to start your server at the same time as your Webpack configuration, and then hopefully eventually they will be successful, right? Lots of people are doing it this way. You can actually start using the Node API. It's much, much better. It's cool. You can also run Webpack as a sub-process. I tend to use this a lot. It's really powerful. So Webpack 2. What's changed? Migrating, super, super easy. There's changes to how the Webpack configuration is structured, but it's not really that drastic. What's mostly has changed, though, is loaders and plugins APIs. So if you're a plugin writer, stuff has changed, but most of the plugins and loaders right now have upgraded. They are compatible with Webpack 2, and it should be a breeze. So Resolve has changed. I recommend you never use resolve, but depend on how resolve in Node works normally. Loaders has been renamed to rules. This really quirky syntax of defining multiple loaders on the same file has been changed into an array. Finally, unfortunately, it's in the wrong order. Still. So module loaders can now no longer use a shorthand name. You should always define Babel dash loader, whatever dash loader. If you don't, it's really hard to figure out for Webpack exactly what you want, right? So loaders now have a property called options. You should never, ever anymore use custom properties on your Webpack config. If you do, Webpack will complain in your face and will not run. Preloaders has been removed. Extract text plugin has been refactored. This is the major point I faced when upgrading to Webpack 2. Actually, it's not all that hard eventually. So Uglify.js plugin has been changed a bit. Another few plugins have been made redundant, so we no longer need them. Code splitting has been refactored a bit, and it has now been conforming to the standard or proposal standard. You should now stop using a full expression in a require statement. It's really bad because Webpack now can no longer figure out what you might require. Basically, if you do the above statement, it will need to include everything in your bundle, everything it can find, every file, because this could resolve to anything. It's JavaScript, anything goes. But what is supported is passing in a partial expression, because now what Webpack needs to inject into its bundle is more fine-grained, right? It's only the files that are actually in this path. You should stop transpiling ES modules. If you're using Webpack 2, stop transpiling ES modules. You can do it like this, but much better is actually using Babel and a plugin preset. So stop using ES 2015 preset. In conclusion, Webpack, Babel, NPM, they love each other. It's a happy marriage, 3 ways, but yeah. Yeah. So my conclusion is Webpack is awesome. It's not magical, as lots of people seem to think. Its configuration file is not all that bad. It has a fantastic ecosystem. You can use it in many ways, and upgrading to Webpack 2 is easy. That's it. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we won't have time for questions, but we can still grab Norbert in the breaks. We'll have now a 15 minutes break, and we get back here at 8:35 and continue with a fun panel session. So
And Nikolai? Or are you scared? I think Nikolai is scared.
What am I doing here?
Okay, so. Woo! All right. No pressure. No, we don't do pressure. So, welcome to Never Mind the Buzzwords. It's a game where the points don't matter, but they do. And I need the names of our team 1. Hold on. Here's a team, or team 2 actually. Let's start from the left.
My name is Vincent.
Vincent. So, team 2 player. Norbert. Dana. Okay.
What's your team name?
Yeah, you have to come up with a team name. Yeah.
The winners.
Oh. Okay. All right. Thanks to David, my assistant, who has done a lot of soldering to get all the microphone cables working. It's really finicky stuff. Okay, team 1. Sjoerd. Stijn, our fixed panel member, who hates everything about JavaScript, and that's why he's here. Gerbert. All right. So the idea is you all have a buzzer that should be on, actually. So there's a switch on the side that you need to push forward, and then it blinks.
Does it shock?
I can kick you.
Okay.
Much more real. Yours doesn't work? Okay. Does it?
It does.
Yeah, so does it work now? Yes. I think everything works. Wow, holy crap technology. Okay. David, are you out of range? Yeah, thought so. He has the 2 reset controllers, so I don't have to do the... Is that wrong or right? Okay, everything is working. Great. So, let's listen to the sounds everybody makes. Okay, start over there. Stijn. Sjoerd. Woohoo. Dana.
No sound.
No sound. Are you inoperable?
Yeah.
There you go. All right, and the last one. Awesome. The move of functional programming. Okay, so everybody has points, and we're going to start with the first question. Service workers, can you make a fitting analogy? A fitting analogy.
A proxy?
That's technically correct, yes.
It's not working.
No, it needs to be reset. David, did you reset it? And could you try it?
Trying it all the time.
Is everybody not working?
Hello?
Hello?
Oh yeah, you also have a microphone. That's actually kind of important. Stop and then...
Stop. Start.
Could you press it?
I'm pressing it so
are
hard.
we out of range or something?
Mine works.
Yeah, yours works. Awesome. Okay, so... Oh no. Oh.
Technology, right?
No, I think a whole
Can
controller
everybody
is down.
turn off their mobile phones, please?
What, is yours working? No, please don't do that. Because they'll also go search for stations and stuff. Stijn, is yours not working at all? Okay, it looks like we have a controller malfunction. This is really terrible.
Is this part of the question?
Okay, we restarted it. All right. David, could you reset it? Okay, that's my WebSocket. New WebSocket. Oh. Let's start the game show. Oh yeah, man. Okay.
Is this your awesome editor, Rick?
Yeah. Let's make
You're
that.
running on 2001 Space Odyssey, maybe?
Could you press anything?
Yeah. I'm now blinking.
You got a point. Well, never.
Do we just completely miss one entire controller? David? Okay, could I have one, please?
Yeah, here you go.
Sorry, this is really annoying.
Let's just put one per table.
One? No, that doesn't work.
We could just raise our hands.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, we'll. Okay, give me 2 minutes, and then we'll revert to low-tech solutions.
I think this is a good analogy to the service workers, right?
Yeah,
They work, but
this is offline browsers right here.
not that.
Yeah, that's really terrible. Come on.
So we should tell a story or something?
Yeah, if anybody has a story.
I tell a story. Okay, I used to make Ajax applications in Netscape Navigator 4. Like, who remembers this? I did in 1998.
Can I have another
No,
one?
this was with hidden frames. You didn't even have iframes, so you would place a frame on the side of the screen, and then you would load data in there, and then transfer it over to your main screen. No, it was not iframes; it was frames. Indeed, it was called layers, and it was performing better on Linux actually than. Yeah, indeed, the first signs.
Okay, this is the radios are just completely not working.
Shall I turn off the?
Yeah, maybe drop all your cell phones in a sealed box. That's gonna help. So this one, it seems to be working, but controller 1, as you can see in the nice log, is not liking it at all. Okay. Yeah, just remember your sounds.
But they have the chicken.
Yeah, I think it still works. Otherwise, we're going to go with raising hands. I'm sorry. I mean, at least you got the audio fixed, right? That was a real big challenge. All right. Let's just start with the quiz. And we can still assign... Can we assign points, David? Only to one side?
Hey, you already have that.
I have 2 points.
Congrats.
Can I have the other side? Otherwise, it's... Okay, well, I'm going to award the points then from here. You'll do the other side. Okay, so make a fitting analogy. Yes.
I always wanted to be you, so that's great.
Okay, so please take the microphone, because the web stream really likes the microphone. And give your analogy. You, Norbert? Stijn? What?
I think the controllers flipped, Rick.
Does anybody have a USB hub or anything random like that?
This is so much more fun than the actual quiz.
No, this is terrible. You know, and we tested this like so many times. Just like, my test coverage was 100%.
Then it does work.
Okay. No, we just moved the radio somewhere else. Okay, and now? Does it work now? Holy crap, it might work.
Let's do
Shall we do a test?
Yeah, we need to do a slide test. Can we reset, David? I think I'm getting a lot of data from all of the... Does it work? All right. Okay, analogy. Come on, we're doing a quiz here. We're not like troubleshooting radios. And
I'm Stein.
Stijn. Are we swapped now?
Yeah. Again.
Woohoo!
Works.
Everything that can go wrong will go
There we
wrong.
go. I'm myself again.
Okay. Okay.
It's me. Yes, it's your mother-in-law, because then at some point, you know, you basically tell her, you know, you need food, and then she gives it to you.
You do know that it's 2017 and we need to be careful with sexist remarks.
Oh, sorry. Oh
You
my
know,
God, I'm
in the
so
Ajax
old.
days, you could do these things, but now
Okay.
it's all.
Right, you're absolutely right.
All right, Vincent.
I think it's somewhat like when you're visiting a party and then you've brought your child with you, but then the party's over and you leave, but you leave the child over there to handle things for you.
Wow, this guy's a
Some
pro.
service that works,
Holy
right?
shit, this guy's a pro.
Not with children.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's nice. You get a -1, Gerrit. Yeah, it's terrible. All right. Let's see if we can survive the technological hurdles of the next question. Reduce Redux for us.
Can we use Webpack?
They'll reduce it, I think. Okay, you get a point for that.
It's like Ajax, but then a lot complicated.
I'd say that's not a reduction. No, it's not a reduction. No.
Like a redu, which is a shorter redux without the X.
That's yeah, no, definitely. That's yeah. I think you'll have npm dependency problems with that one, but it is definitely a point. Yes. Okay, so nobody knows. All right, so you know, it's a pretty short statement, but it's a state management machine that allows you to essentially write reducers on your state, and the reducers change your state. Actually, they make new state. And then I stopped reading the Wikipedia page. All right. Why is state bad?
Because it's mutable.
What if you like mutable?
Well, then it's not.
I love state.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you want to have more control.
More control. I guess that's correct. Yes.
I think you should maybe ask people who've lived in a communist state why it's bad, because
You can see that. You do see. You do see that I purposefully omitted the word "the," right? To keep the politics out of it, because that's just. Yeah. Does the reset stop working? No, you have to reset it, because otherwise people can't buzz. So why is state bad? Well, state is bad because essentially it gives you an enormous amount more code flow possibility. State is bad because of code flow possibility. So if code goes left or right or up or down or even in reverse, then you know, that is bad if there's many opportunities, because every opportunity is a potential for a bug. So that's as far as I understand it.
Why do I have 8 gigs of state in my laptop?
Yeah. Everything is state.
Solid state.
No, RAM is state.
Yeah.
But is that good?
Solid state is.
There is no state.
There is no state. I don't even think that works in the Matrix, man.
No. Enemy of the state. That's another.
Oh, that's another movie. Okay. All right. Cool. Who knows the CSS priority list? Come on. Do you know it?
ID.
Oh my.
Class. Tag.
No. It's far worse than that. I had to look it up because I was like, okay. All right, I think I can go back to full screen now. Oh my God, maybe the radio interference comes from full screen. All right. So So this is the CSS priority list. First of all, whoever read that top thing as not important? Yeah. It's not. It means important. I'm like, I don't get it. And then inline, media type, user-defined, specific selector, rule order, parent inheritance, CSS and HTML, and browser default. Did you know that the browser has a default CSS file that it loads?
Yeah. Starting one.
Okay, I'm apparently not a web developer, and I like to keep it that way.
You've got user customized styling in the browser missing.
That's why your links are underlined in blue.
Yeah, and that's
Ooh.
why you should set your background color to purple so you can see all the developers who forget to set the background color on their webpage.
Ah, and that's useful how? Okay, but yeah, no, this is pretty terrible. So if you're looking for why something is fucked on your page, then, well, this is the list of things that could do it. Huh?
So who does know it?
Oh, I don't know. Well, Wikipedia does, apparently. All right, next question. Cascading shit sideways. I thought that was a nice joke. How do web components help here?
They don't.
No, that's not true. Cascading shit sideways.
Well, by componentizing, you can basically express anything. So you can make it go sideways and turn it into shit.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. You get to dig yourself out of your hole.
You make a shit component, right?
You pack your
Make a shit component.
And then you make a sideway component. And then you put the shit on the sideway.
Actually, the joke actually means something real.
Really?
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, I thought the word S was shit. No. Stein?
Yeah, you can sidestep the entire point of CSS by having a web component, and then you can have your separate CSS inside the component, which is not affected by the outside.
There you go. See, the components have like a bit of a DOM that sticks out sideways called shadow DOM that have its own CSS scope. That's really cool, I think. No, I actually knew that before Wikipedia, but I did verify that I was correct about it. So. All right, we have a lot of questions and we messed up a lot of time, so let's keep going. JS the wrong way. Why should we not be transcompiling JavaScript?
It can go really, really wrong.
No, I fully agree. I think that's worth a point. Yes?
Why spoil a perfectly good language by transcompiling into JavaScript?
That's a point from the hater, definitely.
It makes it harder to debug your code because it's something different that's actually running. And you need to include source maps, which makes everything more complicated.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yep.
Hey, that's on me.
I think you should probably also ask people who maintain a CoffeeScript code base why it's bad.
Yeah, but that's also because CoffeeScript sucks in all sorts of other ways than the compiling part. Yes?
You miss on all the marvelous things of JavaScript. Maybe I should say that in microphone. I did feel that with transcript.
Well, the argument for transcompiling is that you do get all the new marvelous things of JavaScript, right? Yes?
Because it takes half a day to set up the project then.
Yes, it does. Also, you take a perfectly fine language that doesn't need a compiler and give it one. That's my main reason. It's like you get the worst of all worlds. You get a language that actually could benefit from a compiler, and then, but it doesn't have it. But that gives you all sorts of amazing things like live reloading and having your source maps fine. I don't agree. But okay, yeah, no, transcompiling has its fall. Has its role. What? More?
Yeah, it makes it harder for newcomers because now you're introducing all these new things. Newcomers know, yeah.
Yeah, no, I
normal
totally agree.
JavaScript.
Yeah, it's like, have you ever read like starting with JavaScript in 2017? It's like, we're getting really old, Herbert. Promises. Why is a promise resolved next cycle if it already has a value? Yes.
Because it's asynchronous by nature.
No. I mean, sure, I guess, but why do they do that?
to make sure you don't want to know that it's active.
It's in the
No.
spec.
Is the
It's
name-
required by spec.
Yeah, but why did the spec? That's cool. But why did the spec people do that? You can yes, Stein.
A computer sort of uses cycles to go from one state to the next, so technically you can't resolve it in the same CPU cycle.
Mr. Low Level, yes. Okay, but that's not the real answer. Yes.
I'm thinking because you pass a callback to the then or the catch, and the callback is put on the end of the stack, probably, and then it has to wait for all the other stuff to execute before it can call that callback with the value it already has. Just guessing here.
No, I don't think so. I think the reason is that they wanted to make sure that no matter if your promise has a value or not already, it executes in exactly the same way.
This was the should statement. Thank you, Sergey.
Oh, you said that? Did it?
Because it's asynchronous by nature.
Async? But that's not an answer to why asynchronous by nature. Okay, well, if that's what you meant, then you get awarded a point. Okay. Cool. So what makes a web app progressive? Yes. Vincent.
When it progressively loads, so you first load the shell, then the...
That's definitely part of the answer.
It can operate offline using a service worker.
Okay, but why would the progressive part apply to it? Yes?
When it works actually on the NS trains. That you can actually read
Yep,
some
no, that's a
content.
point, yep.
That you
Yeah,
can read some
but
content
only if
without
it's on
having to-
time, right?
Yeah, on time.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, the progressive part is indeed, so you do get a point, that you can turn your web app into a real mobile app, and it progresses from being, and it's progressive also in download, incremental download, but it progresses a web app to be a real mobile application. All right, fancy API. What's the most useless web API you can come up with? Stein.
Cup holder access.
What?
Oh, yeah. I think you can do that with MSCDX, right?
I think so.
Yeah, open the cup holder. That's what the whole thing was. Nobody remember what that was? It was the DOS API to open your CD-ROM drive. Fuck off as a service. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, but you don't have a point system, so, you know.
But there's also a cat API.
A cat API. And what does a cat API do?
It shows cat gifs, like funny cat gifs. Just that. I actually use it in one app.
Okay, cat API.
Let's just say it exists.
All right.
Just serves you random pictures.
Does do the buzzer still? Yeah, the buzzer still work.
Maybe the empty promise API where you can pass it then, but it will never call it, even though it resolves.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, the empty promise API, awesome.
There's so many real ones.
Why is it the most useless one?
Don't bet.
Don't pad, that's a good one. Yeah, you can make it, people will install that shit, man. NPM is like that.
I think it's about teacup. No, what is what? About tea sinkhole?
Go.
There was something in the old Mozilla browsers.
Kitchen sink.
Kitchen sink.
Oh, the kitchen sink, okay. All right. Why do we call HTML, CSS programming, and why is it not automated yet?
Because then we would be out of jobs.
But this is AmsterdamJS. I left that part off.
Yeah, but still, it's next to the.
I think HTML and CSS together are actually like Turing complete. I've read that one somewhere.
Turing complete, wow. Yes?
Dark arts. Dark magic.
Dark magic. I'll go. But why is it not automated yet? Apparently somebody likes it.
Because nobody can write a spec.
Gerbert, what?
I think essentially it's basically XML, you know, so it's complex enough to express graphs and anything you like. So, which means it's basically infinite. So It's hard to automate. People keep adding shit to it. So, yeah.
No, I have a theory why it's called programming and why it's not automated yet. But
Let us hear it.
well, the theory is that
You rewrote the whole application in WebGL, so.
I know.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
I have
You're the prime
something
example.
against it.
you are the prime example of this.
Of not using it and being a happy and fully functioning individual by some standards. Why is it called programming? Well, because essentially the variability is so high that you never know what you're going to get, which is true for programming and true for HTML. So they try to be stateless, but they still have some, but with all the CSS states. But the biggest problem is that it's unpredictable. As soon as something becomes unpredictable, people seem to call it programming. And why is it not automated yet? Well, that's also because it's so incredibly unpredictable and actually is a very strange compression. So when you make it visual and you try to manipulate that little thing over here, and it's compressed into a CSS rule that also applies to other things, then things break. And also because there used to be, at least, I think there's still the case, but there used to be so many subtle differences that it's very difficult to make actually functioning design tools. Yes?
It's full of bugs, so it's programming.
Yeah, well, that's A. Okay, you get a point to that one. Awesome.
And then a mattress is also programmed.
Oh, you get
Thanks,
the point
Mike.
also then. What?
Great crowd.
What's deep about deep learning?
There's lots of layers communicating.
Onions have layers. Yes, layers. It's
The
a point.
funding.
But the funding, oh, that's a good one. Yes. That's it?
You're the IE guy.
Yeah.
I'm actually doing it right now, but yeah. What's
Your deep voice is deep about deep learning.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, what's deep about it, huh? I don't know. We've been doing it for a while. It's just that there's just more data and more GPUs, I guess. Yeah.
I don't know. So the answer was already given. It's actually the number of layers. So the number of layers in the stack make it deep. But yes,
Yeah,
it's
but
also
that's
very
just,
deep.
That's just a straight up answer. Like,
I know.
That's not funny at all.
I know. You know what's not funny? That thing taking your job, man.
Yeah.
That's not funny. But anyway.
Well, from my end, it is.
So when a future AI will do your job, as it will, probably a deep learning network, what would you tell it?
42.
Yeah,
That'll fuck it up.
say the same thing.
That'll fuck it up. It'll be like, oh my god, an integer.
Yeah. Make yourself better. Huh?
Make yourself better. Yeah, let's do
That should
that.
keep it busy for a while.
Yeah.
So we can all have fun.
Does it not
Doing
work
your
anymore?
job, so it's already telling itself.
Does it st-
You stopped them.
Maybe it went in power saving. Could you unlock it?
It switched again.
Too sure.
Oh no. Well, we had a good time, right? What time is it? Time for beer. I think it's time for beer, guys. All right.